Our first movie tells the story of a friendship behind prison walls that spans more than 20 years.
Welcome to episode 8 of Middlebrow Madness, an exercise in podcast hubris. My name is Derek Godding.
Long, slender, masculine fingers tore up the bread pieces as they were thrown to feed the group of pigeons in front of the young man. At first glance, he looked like a gentleman taking a long break from filming a period piece or some commercial somewhere in the large, bustling, busy city of New York.
What are you doing?
If you did a double take and actually studied him, he sat at this bench every day at the exact same time, tearing apart the exact same bread for the exact same birds. He wore a black bowler hat, a black suit with dovetails, and had a bamboo walking cane. He was dressed after his hero, Charlie Chaplin. The only thing missing was the silly mustache he couldn't wear comfortably. This young, eccentric man's name was Edward Cullen. Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Arf.
What the fuck?
So that was because I Google searched fanfiction.net for Charlie Chaplin, and I happened to find that, and I figured you'd appreciate it, Derek.
You can't just do that.
Well, I did. So that's our new intro.
I'm literally speechless. I don't understand what happened. No! Michelle, we're not doing Twilight or Chaplin today.
Yeah, but I couldn't... Okay, because the only fan fiction I found for Steven Spielberg was way too raunchy to read on this fucking podcast.
Oh, wait, time out. Did it you are coming in hot out of the gate, Michelle. Jesus Christ. Give me 1 second to catch up.
Do you want me to look up the Spielberg fan fiction and read part of it to you?
I mean, we're here, aren't we? Okay, while Michelle is looking up Steven Spielberg fan fiction, this is Middlebrow Madness, a podcast where we ostensibly talk about some movies from the large, gigantic IMDb top 250 bracket that we've set up. And we've got 2 matchups today, but now I gotta hear this fucking fanfic, I guess.
So this is from a story called Harrison Ford, the Biggest Slut.
Oh my... Continue.
When they opened the door and saw Harrison in a Speedo, they fully realized what they were here for. Hey, Harrison, you want to take off those clothes and let us show you something very, very pleasurable? Mr. Spielberg said calmly. If you are here, Mr. Spielberg, that must mean you are on about sex, Harrison blushed. Of course, so let's bloody hurry up with this. I was drinking, George Lucas said angry. One by one, they all stripped...
Wait, George Lucas is here too?
Yes, he's there too.
Oh my God.
One by one, they all stripped off, all wanking over Pan, fingering his ass and urethra.
Whoa, time out. Okay, let's put the kibosh on. What the fuck, Michelle?
That's why I said I couldn't read that one. You made me read that. That was your fault.
I didn't think we were going to be talking about fingering urethras on this show, and now I've repeated it. Now I've perpetuated it. Great. Let's talk about... Oh my God.
Let's talk about Schindler's List.
We're not doing Schindler's List first.
Fine, let's talk about movies.
We can't... Okay, this is what we do on this show. We got a big old bracket. 250 movies in the top 250 from the Internet Movie Database, plus 6 ringers that we've chosen. 3 from me, 3 from Michelle. We've already done one in the last episode. Or no, there's one in this episode. There's one of them in this episode. So that's 256 movies. Single elimination bracket. We put them head-to-head until we get a champion. This podcast is going to go on until, 2022 or some shit. And we have vetoes sometimes because we're 2 people. Sometimes we disagree, and sometimes we disagree more. I have my 4 for real intact. Michelle has 3. And if one of the 6 ringer movies is in a tie, it automatically loses because, what's the point of doing an IMDb bracket if the IMDb movies don't go forward? And I guess we read fucking X-rated fan fiction?
Okay, you made me read that. I read some PG-rated fan fiction about a nice man named Edward Cullen who happens to like Charlie Chaplin quite a bit. You made it get dirty. That was your fault. And also, just so everyone knows, now that I know I can completely derail the podcast, I'm going to be doing that more often.
Michelle. Now I'm going to want to derail the podcast, and I'm going to have to do some stupid shit.
Well, I guess we'll escalate that until this podcast stops being about movies entirely.
Oh, man. All right, we got two matchups. We've got Raging Bull versus Howl's Moving Castle. We've got a Ghibli movie on this, and we've already got people's thumbs in their assholes. This is not the show I set out to make. And we've also got Schindler's List versus Winter Light, which is one of Michelle's ringers. I'm still speechless, Michelle.
Do you want me to talk about Howl's Moving Castle first to start things off?
Yeah, that movie's fucking wonderful.
Yeah, I just watched it today. It's actually it's a very good movie, I have to say. So, Howl's Moving Castle, for those who haven't seen it, is about a young woman.
Wait, I should probably do a tail of the tape first.
Oh, I guess sure.
Howl's Moving Castle, since we've already brought it up, the 134 seed in this tournament, released in 2004, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, based on the novel of the same name, or the book of the same name, I'm not sure if it's a novel, by Diana Wynne Jones. 0 for 1 at the Oscars in 2006, losing out Best Animated Feature to Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
Bullshit. I like Wallace and Gromit, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, and a bona fide worldwide smash, $24 million to make, and it earned $250. Raging Bull, released in 1980, directed by Martin Scorsese, based on Raging Bull by Jake LaMotta, who is also known as The Raging Bull. Starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Kathy Moriarty, 2 for 8 at the Oscars, winning Best Actor Robert De Niro and Best Editing for by Thelma Schoonmaker, and modest hit, 18 mil to make, and 23 at the box office. Now, I don't know if that's a modest hit. I think that just barely made its money back. This was more of a critical dump. But let's go back to talking about Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah, definitely. So it's about a young woman named Sophie who happens to meet a wizard one day named Howl. And through some mishaps, she ends up getting cursed to appear old to everyone who sees her. And she also can't talk about the curse. That's part of the curse. And while leaving the town, going out to the wastes is what they call it, correct?
Yes, I believe.
Yes. She happens upon Howl's Moving Castle and becomes his cleaner, essentially, through a very bad war. And some things happen, and the movie ends, and it's delight the entire time.
Yeah, this isn't...
And also, if you watch the English dub, Billy Crystal plays Calcifer, so that's fun.
Yes. I did not watch the English dub because
It's good. It's a good dub. I mean, just in general, Ghibli films have very good dubs, but... Yeah,
they got the House of Mouse behind them throwing some money around. So
I just didn't want to do any reading today, so...
This was a rewatch for me. This is a fantastic looking, as all of Miyazaki's films are. But this one feels like especially phantasmagorical in that the plot's kind of loosey-goosey and kind of lives and dies by its images. Like, there's like obvious thematic stuff about war and imperialism and compassion, but I think this is like one of the more purely image-driven movies that Miyazaki has made.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say, because, to be honest, I don't remember most of the plot. And I've seen this movie a few times, and it's one of my favorite Ghibli movies, and I still am kind of like, I don't really remember what happens exactly, especially towards the end.
Yeah, the rules and conditions of the curse kind of waver a bit towards the end. I think...
Well, they waver throughout, because there's an early part where she's sleeping, and Howl happens to see her, and she looks young again. And that's never explained. It never seems to, like, go anywhere. She, depending on the moment, it's actually one of my favorite parts of the film, is how she will look older or younger depending on the moment she's in, except that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, when she first gets cursed...
I think it's a beautiful effect, but at the same time...
Yeah, she's kind of stouter, and she has, like, wider features, but, like, later on in the film... She has kind of like her like slenderer, more young Sophie-esque figures, but with like the hair and sort of the wider body. The head will be more narrow. It kind of depends. She does her. This is a kind of best exemplified like towards the end where she does her spiel to the monarch. I guess.
Yes.
And she does the spiel about how like Howl's fucking rad and all that noise, and she gets younger while the speech is going on, and then she like snaps back to old.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that works emotionally for me, even if it doesn't work logically, which is a lot of this film. A lot of this film doesn't really make sense, but the way that it's presented makes it make emotional sense. And I think there's a ton of parallels between this film and Spirited Away, which we talked about in a previous episode.
Which is pretty phantasmagorical in its own right as well. But feels more structured.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're both essentially about a young woman who happens to come into a fantastical milieu of a certain kind.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them feature a very heavy theme of like a family that's created instead of the family that you're given. Both of them have a character who is a villain or is attached to the villain that becomes just part of the crew at one point.
Sure.
Both of them have a flying magic man.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this. This is save me, bail me out. I just listing off things that are similar.
Well, the thing is, Miyazaki has not just like sort of an incredible animator's eye, but there's a thematic through line all of his work. Like they feel like even if this, and this is a testament to his skills as a visual storyteller or as an emotional, is that even like you were saying, even though the plots don't, or the machinations of the plot don't necessarily it makes perfect sense if you take in the feeling of it. And this is not just this goes across the board. There's like exceptions, maybe stuff like Castle Cagliostro is like it's a heist movie basically, and like some of his other films are more sort of like I just said, Spirited Away is a lot more coherent. But I think this is probably the one movie I would show to someone and say, this is what emotional storytelling in animation is.
Would you say that over Spirited Away?
I think Spirited Away, by dint of the fact that it has a stronger narrative plot framework to it. I mean, it's just as phantasmagorical and it's just as emotive. But I think on a pure visual and emotion level, Howl is the one I'd point.
Okay. I think it's fair. I wasn't prepared to have this discussion, so I don't have anything prepared for it. I do think that the film is best when it's letting those images just go.
Oh, 100%.
And it's letting those images really drive the movie. And one of my favorite things about it is actually from the dub. I actually really like Christian Bale's performance, but you can see it in the animation as well in that...
Does he play Howl?
Yeah, he plays Howl.
Okay.
And that Howl is either incredibly dramatic or he's incredibly happy and doesn't seem bothered by anything.
Yeah, he's like an uwu anime boy, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
An uwu anime boy.
Yes, Derek. I can't believe that was just said on this podcast. Of all the things in this episode that's been ridiculous so far, that's probably the most
this podcast
ridiculous.
Cold with fanfic, and I'm getting shit for speaking in the vernacular of the time.
I was just warming us up. So, and I like the character.
A classic episode.
I like the character of Sophie quite a bit.
Very good character.
I think that she develops more of a personality, I think, than
Shiro.
Yeah, thank you. Than Shiro it does in Spirited Away, because I also think this movie's trying to say a lot different things. Whereas Spirited Away isn't really about love. Like obviously she cares about why can't I remember anyone's fucking name? Oh my god, I'm dying.
In Spirited Away?
Yes. The boy. The
young dude. Is it Ren Shen?
Haku. They definitely love each other, but it's not like a romantic sense of love. Whereas in Howl's Moving Castle, it does seem like a romantic sense of love. And I think that because of that, it doesn't... I don't want to say it's at all a bad film. I still give it 4.5 stars. I still think it's one of my favorite of Miyazaki movies. I think it's harmed slightly by the fact that in quick succession, I've watched Spirited Away, I watched Princess Mononoke, and I watched this. And I think this is the weakest of the three by a decent margin. Because it doesn't have... The thing that I loved about Spirited Away specifically, I won't talk about Princess Mononoke too much, even though it's... Derek, that movie fucking rules.
It does fucking rule. And I mean, it's gotta be somewhere on this bracket.
It is, yeah, we'll get to it. So I'll have a chance to say why it fucking rules later.
Oh, this is late. This is the third to last match of the first round. And it's up against Hotel Rwanda.
And I won't spoil anything. I'm not gonna say anything else. So... I think that the reason this movie is a little weaker than Spirited Away is because Spirited Away has an uncertainty and a sense of a lack of resolve, or resolution rather, that this film, it's a little too easy at points. Like the end of this film is everyone gets what they want and everything's fine. Whereas the end of Spirited Away is, hey, I'm leaving all these friends I made to
it's
go...
It's a more complex ending.
Yeah, it's a much more emotionally complex feeling. And I think that Howl's Moving Castle, for all it's trying to do, I'm not sure that the anti-war themes really cohere exactly.
I mean, in the
sense that they don't...
Is bad.
Yes, but that's like an easy thing to depict. But, and I think that there's moments like when Howl says, I think it's Sophia's well, wouldn't you want to fight on the side of our king? And Howl's what does it matter? They're both bad. Instead of being both sidesism or anything like that, it's a lot more a sense of, this act of war is in and of itself bad. It doesn't matter that your side is winning. It doesn't matter that the people who you ostensibly are cheering for are doing well. It matters that, like, people are dying. And the world's on fire, literally, for parts of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a giant, like, battleship that comes in all fucked up in a harbor. Good image.
It is a good image. But at the same time, because it doesn't have that strong emotional through line to me, like, I think the love story works. I think that everything in it works, but it doesn't have that same kind of, oh, this really grabbed me, and it made me feel these really complex feelings of both nostalgia and difficulty and joy and sadness and, like, the bittersweetness. I'm finding myself at a slight loss of what exactly to say about it, to be honest.
Well, I think that emotional through line, at least for me, because for myself, is it becomes stronger if you fold in, like, the first batch of secondary characters, if you consider, like, the network of, like, the 5 main characters. I think that's where it flies highest, and not necessarily romantic subplot alone.
Sure.
But I mean, it's great. I think this is, like, 2004 was like a banner year for like long form animation from Japan, and this is definitely a highlight. I think it is kind of a grower, because I think I might have underrated it the first time I saw it, and I bumped it up like when I watched it.
Yeah, I think I feel bad that I don't have more to say about this movie. It's very good, but at the same time, I'm thinking a lot about Raging Bull and how it's not a very good movie.
See, we're going to have a disagreement.
I think we will, yes. I think Raging Bull is a film by Martin Scorsese. Let's just transition right into it. That stars Robert De Niro in perhaps his most acclaimed performance, at least after the fact. It's the film everyone points to.
He got the Oscar for it, though.
He did. And it is widely considered one of Scorsese's best films. I think that both those things are deeply silly. I think it's the worst Scorsese film I've ever seen. I would take The Departed over this, and I don't think The Departed's a great film. I'll say this. I get what people see in this movie, but I don't see it.
I mean, so I'm going to say all these things that I liked about Raging Bull, and you're going to say, I get it, but
they didn't do anything for me.
They didn't do anything for you.
Like, I get that it's trying to it's not a heroic picture, obviously. It's a picture about an asshole.
It's a picture about an asshole.
And he's a very good asshole. He plays an asshole very well. But at the same time, like, man, I just didn't give a shit about anything that happened in this fucking movie. It was so boring, Derek. I hate to fall on that because it's like such a lazy thing to say, oh, this movie's boring. It doesn't actually say anything, really. It just is like, hey, I didn't like this movie. But I could not wait for this movie to end.
I am a heterosexual.
True.
Now, as such, I've been culturally groomed to buy into the romance of boxing. And also, I mean, not like sort of helped by the fact that I watch a lot of wrestling's like weird cousin, boxing's weird cousin, professional wrestling. The sort of romance and drama of combats and the interpersonal drama there. The rise in this movie is not nearly as affecting as the fall. The back half of this movie is a lot better, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
I think, like, on a just technical level, I don't know if this is the best cinematic depiction of boxing on a raw technical level.
No.
But it's better than $1 Million Baby, which we covered previously.
Yeah, that's not a high bar.
It's not a high bar, but it's the bar we have to work with.
Okay, here's a better... I mean, you didn't see this movie, so it's not a very bad bar. But a better bar for me is the fact that I saw a movie earlier this year called Wilderness, which is about boxing as well. Didn't like it for most of it. But there's a final sequence, and the boxing in that is so much better depicted and so much more real and violent and almost frightening but majestic at the same time than anything in this movie. This movie felt very bloodless to me, oddly.
Because which is weird for a movie that was kind of condemned for its violence, because it was not like a huge hit.
Yes.
But I thought that when we talked about Martin Scorsese previously with Wolf of Wall Street, I said that I liked sort of the energetic filmmaking, and I thought that energy was definitely there, at least in the boxing, because this movie is basically half in the ring and half sort of a domestic drama. But yeah, I love if not necessarily the depiction of boxing, I love the energy. I thought the movie looked really, really good. I thought I did like Robert De Niro's performance. I would agree that it's not his best, but I did like it. I liked all the supporting cast. I liked Joe Pesci doing his Joe Pesci thing.
Yeah, Joe Pesci was good. I liked him quite a bit in it. I
also liked I also liked Kathy Moriarty in probably not the most overwritten part, but she did pretty good with it. The back half of the movie where Robert De Niro pawns his championship belt, doesn't even pawn it. He fails at pawning his belt to pay for bail, and basically just becomes a ledger in a book in a library that no one checks out because he was champion for 18 and has a shitty nightclub act, is affecting. That back half of the film, I think, I don't know, I really fucking liked it.
I mean, like I said, I see what it's doing for the people, and I think the last thing I want to say about this movie is I'm actually going to quote from a Letterboxd review by my friend Owen. I think he put it...
Oh, yeah, Owen.
He put what is worthwhile about this film way better than I ever could, especially since I didn't see much that was worthwhile. And I will say it didn't work for me, but apparently it works for other people, and the review I'm about to quote will say why. I apologize for this. This is going to be a slightly long quotation, but... When I watched Raging Bull in my 20s, I didn't see much worth saving in Jake. I just saw an interesting character study in paranoia, sexual dysfunction, and other elements that make up what we may today call toxic masculinity. Not to mention the masterful editing, cinematography, and general mise-en-scene. But Jake himself, Jake the character, where he ended up, I viewed him ending up a pathetic sub-lounge lizard dating floozies as justifiable punishment for having been a terrible person. I didn't really see much having changed within him except him losing everything he held dear. How did this character save Scorsese? How did this story give Scorsese hope? Well, I'll let Scorsese tell you. And this is a quote from Martin Scorsese. I don't know. The film really doesn't help me to see these things more clearly, nor does it help me to understand others or myself. What really interests me is hope. In the pit of his dungeon, Jake doesn't have anything. He's lost it all. Vicky, his brother, his house, his children, his championship belt. Before, we saw him undergo a terrible punishment from one of the, you know what I'm saying.
I think it's Dutel.
Thank you. He let himself be massacred then. In the last seconds, he had a surge of pride and demolished his opponent. In other words, he's never really gotten what he deserves. He hasn't paid. After which, he meets Robinson. What does he see there? He sees his blood squeezed out of the sponge, his body that they're preparing for the sacrifice. For him, it's a religious ritual, and he happens to use Robinson to punish himself. As I told you, everything happens in his head. He thinks he's at the end of his martyrdom, but there again his pride carries him away. When they stop the fight in the 13th round, he yells, I didn't hit the floor, and rebels one more time. Then the posing for the photographs at the swimming pool in Miami, and you can see everything he has to lose. Vicky, the kids, the Cadillac, the nightclub. He loses all that immediately, and now in his cell, all that's left is himself. He's facing the wall, facing himself, and he screams, I'm not that guy. He has fallen so low that he can only come up to be reborn. When we find him in the striptease joint, he has changed. A customer threatens him like a clown, and he answers, without any aggression, that's why I'm here. He has found a kind of peace with himself. He's no longer the same man. Of course, it's not ideal, but he could have fallen even lower. His job isn't degrading. He has stopped destroying himself like so many of his friends. He has survived. And that's my elegy for this film because I don't think it's going to move on.
Shout out to Owen.
Yes.
And shout out to Martin Scorsese. Yeah, what am I going to do? Disagree with Marty?
I will. Hey, Marty, your movie wasn't very good. I like you. You're a good director. But make a couple more Bringing Out the Deads and a couple fewer Raging Bulls.
I still haven't seen Bring It, which seems
off-brand. It's fucking great. It's so good.
Nicolas Cage, right?
It is. It's one of Cage's best roles, which is saying quite a bit. So we're left with a choice, and it's Raging Bull versus Howl's Moving Castle. I think it's pretty clear where I'm leaning, but I want to hear about you.
Again, this is like, oh man, because I think that both these movies are exemplary, and I get that that's the whole gimmick of this podcast.
Yes, it is.
And not to like cast aspersions or do or like assume, but I get the feeling that over the course of this show you're going to dissent more.
Almost certainly.
Which kind of puts me, the person who will dissent less, in more precarious position. So I get to wield the hammer a lot.
Yeah, I'm giving you all the power. I'm just here saying that Raging Bull isn't a very good movie.
Man,
I think I'll get plenty of
fucking great.
I'll get plenty of pushback in that at some point if anyone listens to this podcast.
And I don't want to metagame it either. God, this is probably the toughest one for me that I've done so far.
I'm very surprised at that. Like harder than Modern Times versus the Maltese Falcon.
Oh, that was hard too. Oh man, God, Miyazaki has other move brackets.
He does, yeah.
He got Spirit.
One of his already moved ahead.
One of us already moved ahead, and he's got more lined up. Like Totoro's in probably, right?
No, I think it's actually, is it Grave of the Fireflies or something else that's on there besides Princess Mononoke?
No, Totoro is there at 132.
Okay. Copy.
Princess Mononoke is there. And Grave of the Fireflies is there, but that is how Takahata joined. So
Oh, yeah.
Ghibli's got plenty of horses in this field. I'm going to say Raging Bull and use a veto.
Shit. Okay. Well, folks, it looks like Raging Bull is moving ahead.
I fucking love Howl's Moving Castle, but I think that the other Ghibli movies that we're going to be talking about I like more than this one, even though this one's pretty masterful.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think that this is one of the weaker films that of the Ghibli films that are on this list, but
Grave of the Fireflies is against Rush.
the band, the entire discography of the band Rush. So if you're a libertarian, tune into that episode.
Oh, man.
There's two kinds of Rush fans. You're either a libertarian or you like drum solos.
You're
the second camp, I know.
I will swap your joke into a different joke. There's two kinds of Rush fans: libertarians and like Canadian heshers.
I was gonna say and Canadians.
Well, specifically because I was listening on a podcast. Someone mentioned this on a podcast I listened to, and I forget which one. Is that Rush in Canada is like Hesher music. It's for like knuckle dragging small town people. It's not like philosophically intelligent, smart drum solo music. It's music for Hicks. So
Hicks deserve better music.
I mean, Hicks do deserve better music.
Okay.
So do we all. But I'm on record as being a Rush fan.
True.
Straight up. Am I also a libertarian? Tune in to find out when we cover some other fucking movie.
When we cover The Fountainhead.
Incredibles 2.
Atlas Shrugged Part 3 is on this list somewhere. No, it's not.
So yeah, I guess I got 3 vetoes now.
Okay, well, we both used our vetoes in very dumb ways. I'm excited about that.
I don't know if I would call that dumb.
Oh, but you're failing next round, though, right? It's going against either Schindler's List or Winter's Light. Raging Bull loses. If not, my veto is going towards it losing.
Don't be so sure, Michelle.
I'm so confident I would bet all the money I've ever made on it.
I don't even know how this one's going to shake out. So
okay.
let me read the tale.
Yes.
Schindler's List, the 6th seed. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The movie that has been judged the 6th best film of all time by the users of the Internet Movie Database. Released in 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg, based on the novel Schindler's Ark by Thomas Kennially. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Starring Liam Neeson, Ben Kingsley, Ray Fiennes, and Caroline Goodall. 7 for 12 at the Academy Awards. Cleaned the fuck up. And a pretty sizable hit. $322 million made on a $22 million budget. Against Michelle's first ringer, the 251 seed, Winterlight, directed by Ingmar Bergman, released in 1963, starring Gunnar Bjornstrand, Ingrid Thulin, Gunnel Lindblom, and Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have really any ancillary stats on that other than it's been very well received.
Yes, but I think the reason that it didn't make the actual IMDb 250 is there weren't enough votes on it. There weren't enough votes on it. Yeah, it's relatively underseen in my opinion. But let's talk a little bit about Schindler's List. This was the first time I saw this movie, which is again very surprising. I would have thought that it's just a movie you kind of have to see at some point. Like I probably watched it in school, part of it. I probably saw it on TV, all that kind of stuff. And turns out it's pretty good. I mean, I liked it. It is pretty good. We'll get to the issues I have with it in a moment, but I think we should say first what we liked about it. This movie looks great. It's very well shot. It manages. It walks this fine line of being very slick, but also really gnarly. Like I was talking in the chat earlier with our good friend Ross Burks, and he made the point that the pistol shots to the head are upsetting. Yeah, and they're so unceremonious as well. They're just boom, like there's no like rack focuses, there's no close-ups. It's all just so matter of fact that it makes it more uncomfortable and more harrowing to watch. Yeah, and there's a few parts of this film that are harrowing. Beyond just the Holocaust is bad. It's like this movie gets like it gets some shit for using the gas chambers as like a suspense device, which rightfully that seems bad. Yeah, that's and also I don't know what it's trying to. For people who haven't seen the movie, there's a scene where some women are being led into what they think is a gas chamber, and they're going to die, but it actually ends up being just a regular shower. Just a regular ass shower. What is that movie? What is that scene saying in the context of the movie? Not only did I dislike it, it felt very tacky and very... It's a weird scene. It didn't feel like it added anything. I was like, why is this in the movie?
I mean, I think it's a fit, like a fit of poor taste.
Yeah. I think there's also some other fits of poor taste later on, and I think the ending especially is abysmal.
It's so fucking weird.
What the? But before we bury this movie, let's quickly say that the acting is throughout.
The acting is quite good.
Excellent. Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes obviously are kind of the ones people remember. Although I think Ben Kingsley is actually the secret.
Excellent.
He's the secret MVP of this movie, and also the only Jewish person that's in the main cast, which is, or rather, playing a Jewish person, I should say.
Yep. The other two are Nazis.
Yes.
This movie's really weird.
It is.
This movie is like told through the eyes of a capitalist Nazi.
Yeah.
And it's got all these kind of weird, I mean, I hesitate to call them grace notes in the context of this film, but there's some really weird choices. And again, it's this mix of the slick and just utterly confounding.
I feel like we keep edging into just saying all the things we didn't like about it. One more thing I will praise is I think that the sequence of the liquidation of the ghetto is incredibly affecting. The best sequence in the movie, I'd say, and I would agree. It's the thing that dissuaded me from my original thought on this movie. Is I remember seeing this when I was like a high school or whatever, and in my memory, it was Hollywood's version of the Holocaust. It wasn't serious, basically. It was very like sanitized, whereas that sequence is not sanitized at all. It is rough, it is harrowing, and it is what this kind of film should be.
Yeah, that was my assumption too going into this, is that this movie is going to be really slick. It was going to be kind of a spit shine take on the tail, but no, it gets grungy. It's not just the headshots, there's a lot of handheld work. The contrasting is very stark. I missed the girl with the red coat completely because I'm colorblind and the colors don't work that way for my eyes. So that image was lost on me, but that's not the movie. But you know what was the movie's fault?
A lot of stuff. I feel weird saying all these bad things because I still give it 4 stars. I still think it's a very, very good movie.
It's really good. It's a pretty good movie. I mean, it's got the 6th seed. I mean, I don't know if I would make it the 6th best film of all time, but it's a good ass movie.
I wouldn't even say it's the 6th best Holocaust film of all time, but
name 5 Holocaust movies better than Schindler's List.
Shoah,
1,
Night and Fog,
2,
The Night Porter,
3,
Son of Saul,
4,
and the shop on, is it the shop on Main Street or
the shop around the corner?
No, it's not the shop around the corner, you dickhead. I believe it's called the shop on Main Street. It's a Romanian film. Maybe it's a Czech film. Fuck.
The Shop on Main Street is a Czechoslovak film from 1965.
That's it, yeah.
Congratulations, Michelle. You win.
Hooray! Also, I mean, it's not so much about the Holocaust, but about World War II and the war crimes committed during there. Obviously, come and see.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. But
so you want to talk about the ending?
Yeah, let's talk about that ending.
Like, I think there's two
problems with it.
There's 2 problems with it.
The first one.
Do you want to take the big one? Because you're smarter than me and can like actually intone this.
Okay, so the ending of this film is we see that what do you call it? All the people that Schindler saved are waiting for the Red Army to come and basically get them, more or less, because the war is officially over. And as they what do you call it? As they like ask him like, hey, like where are we supposed to go? He was like, well, don't go to the west because they still don't like Jewish people. Don't go to the east because they still don't like Jewish people. I think there's like a town over there that might have food. And then it cuts to a what do you call it? A bunch of people walking across a field.
Wide shot of just a line of people walking.
While the song Jerusalem of Gold plays on the soundtrack, which for those who don't know, it's considered like an informal victory anthem of the Israeli victory during the 6-Day War.
Oh, you see, because I did not know that.
Yeah.
That was lost on me.
Yeah. And the implication is, of course, hey, go to Israel. It's a very explicitly Zionist, and I mean that in the philosophical and like historical sense, not the anti-Semitic sense. I hope should be clear. Sure. But fucking white supremacists ruin everything.
Don't they?
They really do. But it's an explicitly Zionist message. At the end of a film where that seems not only a bit strange, it also seems strange in the context of Steven Spielberg's filmography. Because Munich is a film that has a lot more complicated feelings about the conflict between Palestine and Israel. It has a lot more complicated things to say, whereas this film essentially ends with, hey, the Holocaust is over, let's go to Israel. Nothing bad happened there, right? And it's just I don't understand that choice, except as a political choice. And as a political choice, I vehemently disagree with it. Like, as an aesthetic choice, I can't justify it.
Yeah, I mean, like, my admittedly less politically minded take on it was it just grinds the film to a halt and makes it land with a fart.
Yeah.
It is a bad choice.
Yeah, and
because what they do is they also get the actors, like they get the actual ass survivors and the actors portraying them going to Oskar Schindler's grave.
Yeah, God.
And it takes like a whole fucking 5 minutes. Everyone gets like a little solo, and it's like, well, that's a way to end a movie. I don't know if it is the way to end that movie.
I think it's a very weak way to end that movie, and it's sentimental where the rest of the film isn't.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how that movie doesn't just end after they start walking.
And I want to say it's not just us that has said this in the past. Obviously, it's a very acclaimed film, but you can actually find on the Wikipedia page reactions from the Jewish community, which we should both say we're Gentiles. We're basically talking out of our asses. But there is a Hungarian Jewish author named Imre Kertész, I think would how you pronounce that. I might be totally fucking that up. I apologize. Who was a Holocaust survivor himself, who said he felt it's impossible for life in a concentration camp to actually be portrayed properly by someone who didn't experience it firsthand, and that he said while he was happy the story went to a wide audience, the final scene at the graveyard he thought neglected the terrible after effects of the experience of the survivors and just implied that they were fine.
Right.
And I think that's a very...
That they survived means they were fine.
Yes. And getting into a similar sense of that is the fact that it's really weird, and it's a choice that I personally don't really like, that our two main characters are essentially Ralph Fiennes and Liam Neeson, who are both Nazis, and we don't really ever see this film through a Jewish character's eyes. It's like almost like I don't want to quite say white savior, but it is a bit. And there's a fact that the end of the movie, that the ending that people love so much, is that essentially Oskar Schindler has a breakdown, and says like, oh, I could have saved more people. And then the whole community comes around, and all the people he saved come around and like hug him. And it's like, this is a weird way to end a movie about the Holocaust by looking at how bad a Nazi feels.
Yeah, because Liam Neeson is the proverbial good Nazi.
Yes. And like we should say Schindler was a real guy, and we should not discount all the good he did, certainly.
Nope.
But at the same time, the way it's framed is very problematic to me because it ignores... Obviously, Spielberg is Jewish, so it's not ignoring Jewish voices in that sense, but it is ignoring placing them at the forefront and showing their story. It's Oskar Schindler's story. And to me, that feels like a disservice.
This is a really good movie that's fucked up in key ways.
Yeah, and there's another thing I want to read. So obviously, the thing hanging over this movie is Shoah, which for those who don't know is an 8-hour, or I think 9-hour documentary about the Holocaust that actually interviews survivors and perpetrators. And it is one of the best films ever made. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. And
no, it is widely acclaimed. I have only seen clips, and it is something. Yeah.
And the director of that, this is a very self-important thing for him to say about himself, but he's also not wrong, so I'm just going to quote him. He says,
This is Claude Lanzmann, by the way.
I sincerely thought that there was a time before Shoah and a time after Shoah, and that after Shoah certain things could no longer be done, but Spielberg did them anyways. And like, yeah, like it's kind of, you're saying that about your own movie, but at the same time, yeah, like you're right. It's just like having that knowledge, or even like looking at something like Night and Fog that just better addresses this same thing. I feel like Schindler's List, it's grasping for something, but the way it does it is very Hollywood, in that you have the good guy fighting against the bad guys. You have heroes, you have villains, and the fact that the main villain in this movie, played by Ray Fiennes as Imon Goth, he's just like a sociopathic killer.
Sure.
Instead of just like, it diminishes what the Holocaust actually was by making it seem like, oh, it was perpetrated by literally evil people who literally kill people for fun. It wasn't a political thing. It wasn't the result of an ideology. It was the result of psychosis.
I've seen all of maybe half an hour of Shoah, but in that half hour, I saw a much more thorough and compassionate take on trauma.
Yes.
that I think was absent in Schindler's List.
And I think although you discussed that there is a lot of red tape in this movie, and that's kind of the point of some of it.
This movie
it's very bureaucratic.
It's very bureaucratic. Like, I wanted to make, like, I felt like it was maybe in poor taste to put this as my Letterboxd review, but this was basically a movie about a gallows built with...
Yeah, no. And I think, again, having Amon Goth be literally just a killer instead of, like, a bureaucrat makes it makes it too easy for the audience to not see themselves in it. It makes it too easy for them to say, oh, that's what evil people do, is they commit these acts. Instead of saying, hey, there was a system that was developed, and this system was evil, yes, but the system has also allowed people to pretend they weren't doing evil. It allowed people to ignore the fact that they were doing things wrong, that they were murdering people, essentially. Sorry.
There's also a great sort of, like, capitalist reading of this film in terms of, like,
we're having money saves people.
But we're already probably close to getting to time on
I think
this.
We're already past time, so...
Shit. But, so, Michelle.
Yes.
I want you to sell me on how Winterlight is one of the best films of...
Okay. Do you mind if I start with the poetry reading?
Are you going to read some more fanfic?
No, I'm going to read actual poetry.
Actual poetry, okay.
So,
not to diminish the creations of the fanfiction community.
So, these are some excerpts from a poem called Warehouse of Prayers by Laura Kasich, I think is how you would pronounce her last name. It's Kasischke. It's one of those fun names. Kasich, yeah, that's what I think too. So, and oh, I saw it then. So many prayers. Who could answer them all? And yet, what God would have the heart to toss them out? Yes, he says, I know, it terrifies. The silence and the din, the tremendous weight of them. Defies anything you might think or say about sound, about size. But yes, of course I've kept them all. And the green lawn rolls, and the green lawn rolls, to the foot of it all, to the foot of it all, telling the story of a world created by a God who wanted to be loved but did not like to talk. Always that flash of desire, always in that way, that gray cat sleeping in the driveway, those teenage girls bathing in a pond of bees. That's what's left of the freedom God had to make us or remain free. And suddenly, God answers me. I am made of the same thing you are, after all, and you are made of me. Some darkness, a supplication, a moral silence breezing over the glassy stubble in a vacant field. Like trying to hold fire, like trying to hold perfume, like wearing fog to work, like stoppering a bottle full of light, trying to talk to God. Oh wait, look, after all, that warehouse, that abyss, and a beautiful naked stranger diligently trying to ladle the oceans into it. And I took those excerpts from also my review of Angel's Egg, which is another film that is about faith and about God and about our relationship with God and how difficult it can be when God is essentially silent. And whether...
Good poem, though.
Yes, great poem. I would highly recommend reading more Laura Kasich for everybody that's listening. I think she's amazing. And I think that Winterlight, better than almost any other film potentially that I've ever seen, expresses the difficulty of faith and expresses why it is so hard to believe, and also why you maybe don't want to believe, why God might not exist at all, why one would lose faith. And it does so while still having what I think I told you is one of the happiest endings in film.
Please elaborate.
So,
not that I don't believe you, because I came, like, this is like maybe, since I suck at cinephilia, this is like the fourth Ingmar Bergman, and Michelle is an avowed mega fan of this, so I don't think it's weird to just let her talk and let her make the movie's case.
So for those who haven't seen the film, it's about a priest who has lost faith and who he has come to believe that God stopped talking to him if he ever did talk to him, and it just tracks him throughout a day. At first, he gives a service, and then after the service, a man played by Max von Sydow basically was like, "Hey, I need to talk to you." And during their talk, the man talks about, hey, like, the world, like, he hears about how the Chinese are training their children to be killers, and they're going to drop an atomic bomb on him, on us. And that really shook him, and it made him feel like life is meaningless and pointless. And spoiler, it's not even a spoiler, he kills himself on the way home because the priest isn't able to help him. When he goes to him for help, all this priest is able to talk about is himself and how he lost faith, and the fact that when he was younger, he felt like he had a relationship with God, but the more he grew up, the more he realized it was just an echo of himself that he was seeing. It wasn't actually God. And now he's his wife died recently, or I guess a couple of years ago at this point in the film. And since then, he has lost his ability to believe. At the same time, he has a mistress, who is played by, do you have that?
Ingrid Thulin.
Thank you. And she wants to love him. She writes a whole letter that is portrayed as one unbroken shot of her face.
Great decision.
Incredible.
It's awesome.
And she basically tells him, like, hey, I want to love you, but you're not letting me. I don't know how, and I'm trying to make things better, and you're not letting me, essentially. And that's more or less the entire film.
Yeah, this is a bright and tight, this is a tight 82 minutes.
Yeah, and the film, I was just going to say, the film does end with, after going through these things, like talking to her multiple times, talking to this man played by Max von Sydow, Jonas Pearson, or Pearson it would be, after he killed himself, after the priest, Thomas, goes to tell Jonas's wife that he killed himself, he goes to a second service later that day that he's supposed to give. And before it happens, the Algut Frovic, who's a sexton for the church and who is disabled in some way that's not explicitly explained, he has been trying to get to talk to Thomas all day. And finally they sit down and he's like, hey, you told me to read the Gospels whenever I was having trouble sleeping. So I did. And I keep coming up to this problem, and it feels like the emphasis on the physical pain of Jesus is overdone, because as he puts it, I in my own way have experienced as much physical pain as Jesus. But the thing that really was the most painful and the most harming for Jesus, and the reason that the salvation worked, was first he was abandoned by his friends, all these people he'd lived with and done everything with for years. And they didn't seem to understand anything he'd ever said. They just abandoned him. And then God himself abandons him on the cross. And the Algut says, isn't that like God's silence is like the ultimate punishment, essentially? And you see
that's the through line of the film.
Yes, you see the recognition in Thomas's face. And there's only the only people that are there for the service are Marta, who's his mistress, the organist, Frederick, Algut, who's the sexton, and Thomas, and that's it. And they're like, we don't really have to do the service, like no one's really here. Do you still want to go on? And he chooses to still do it anyways. And that decision is, I think, one of the most powerful decisions in film history. It is a complete explication of, it's like in one single moment, it's the entire essay, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. It is the fact that he feels in this moment the complete lack of God in his life, the complete lack of any love or happiness that he can experience, and he feels hopeless, but he still decides to attempt anyways. I don't think there's a more uplifting message than that, in a strange way. And I've talked for a while, so I'm going to let you talk for a little bit.
I will not lie and say, when I started watching this, that 5 minutes, this is a Michelle-ass movie. It is like comically austere. I mean, comically. But
yes.
It is very austere. It concerns matters of faith. It's Bergman at his most Bergman. He's pulling out all the stops, right down to like the font he uses for the credits of the film. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you basically ran down the plot. This is not a movie that is heavy on incident, at least externally. This is a movie heavy with internal incident, and it is. Again, we've been talking about movies which you wouldn't excise a single from. This is one of them. We were talking also about. No, this is exactly what it says on the tin.
It sure is. And if you didn't like Bergman, this would be the film you point to and say this is like almost a parody of what he does.
Yeah, this is. I could definitely see like it is. It's like to talk about it is almost to ruin its effect. Because it's so spare in how it moves. It has so few cinematic moves that to talk about it at any length, I feel kind of like deflates the souffle a little bit. But watching it is kind of an experience. Now, I don't know if I am of the opinion that this is the great movie endings of all time, but it's a remarkable ending. It's a great ending. And give it like just keeping that light on just a little bit, just enough.
Which Bergman is excellent at. There's another film of his called Cries and Whispers, which we will sadly not get to because it's not on the 250, but that's a film that ends with a scene that just has that barest glimmer of hope, even though, if anything, that's a darker, more extreme version of what's shown in here. One of my favorite scenes in that film, not to digress too much, but one of my favorite scenes in that film is the character played by Ingrid Thulin. She is very cold to her sisters. I'm not going to set up the whole plot, but it does say she has sisters and they have problems. Let's say that.
Sure.
And she's very cold to them.
They've got Bergman problems.
Yes. And there's a moment where she breaks down and she starts crying. It's the first time you've ever seen this in the movie. The first time you ever see her express serious emotion. And this is also a movie where she mutilates her own genitals and you don't even see emotion then. It's a heavy movie. But
oh, Jesus, Ingmar.
Yeah. And it's the first time you ever see her show emotion. And then one of her sisters goes to comfort her. And she says, I don't want you to be kind to me. It's the most heartbreaking scene. It's also one of my favorite scenes in any movie. But it's still, even with that darkness in it, the movie ends on a note that says, hey, it's still worth trying. And it's still worth doing something. Even after, for example, in this film, Winter Light, there's a whole sequence where Thomas just lays into Marta with everything he hates about her. Yeah. And it's harrowing. You can see her discomfort, you can see his discomfort, and the fact that this is them maybe for the first time ever being truly open with one another, and he just has nothing but vitriol and meanness and cruelty. And at the end of it, while talking, she says, every time I've hated you, I've made an effort to turn it into compassion. And if that's not the whole movie, I don't know what it is,
Yeah, that seems to be the through line of it.
And it's, to go back to the Camus reference, and there's an early scene that almost explicitly references that, where with Jonas, Jonas explicitly asks, why do we have to go on living in this world? What's the point of it? Which is obviously the parallel to the opening of The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus is there's only one serious problem in philosophy, and that is the question of suicide. It's the same idea, and both works attempt to say, hey, why don't we just kill ourselves? If the world is meaningless, which it seems to be, if there's nothing external we can gain from it, which seems to be true, there's no God, which also seems to be true, what's the fucking point? And I think both movies both the movie and the essay come away with the most powerful thing you can, which is a sense of determined hopelessness. It's knowing that you can't win, but choosing to go on anyways, essentially. Which is also the reason that I adore the film The Grey. I think this actually has a lot of parallels with the film The Grey. I think they have a very similar outlook, whether it's Liam Neeson fighting wolves, or whether it's a very sad priest talking about why he's sad all the time. I think in many ways they have the same outlook, and that's an outlook that I'm a sucker for.
Fist first into the darkness.
Yes.
Oh, is it better than Schindler's List, though?
Well, I mean, I've given all I can. If you still think Schindler's List is better, then it's going to have to move on, but You've made a very, very, very compelling argument, but it is I who wields the hammer. It is. Schindler's List is great. Fucked up in some key ways, but great. Because on a pure sort of letterbox score level or whatever, I had these at about the same. Mm-hmm. Because it's like gloss versus austerity. It's like sort of glossing over trauma. It's like looking at sort of, one of them is looking at the sort of infliction of trauma, and one of them kind of looks at the residue of it and how you deal with it. They both handle hope in very, very, very different. God damn. And I think at the end of the day, what I'd say is that the hope in Schindler's List rings false to me, where the hope in Winter Light doesn't. And I think it's because of partially that austerity, but also partially just a more materialist and full exegesis of what trauma might feel like. Yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm almost. This is great podcasting, by the way. Me kind of mumbling to myself, thinking about. I do like a good Cinderella story. I'm gonna go with Winter Light. Hooray! We did it, folks. It might lose next round. I'd be fine with that. Although no, shit's going against Raging Bull, so next round is going to be a nightmare. Oh yeah, it's like one of your favorite films of all time, and one of our ringers versus a movie that I really like and that you don't. Yeah. So if you choose next round essentially to move Raging Bull forward, I don't have a choice. It's going. A movie I don't like will make it to round 3 over one of your favorite films of all time. Over my 4th favorite film of all time, if the recent list I made on Letterboxd is anything to go by.
But thankfully, we don't have to cross that bridge for a very, very, very long time.
Yes, true. So, after that long... this is our longest episode by far. I think we way overwent with the time limits, but...
Well, I did kind of like basically bait you into just selling me on this movie.
That's true, which I love doing. I'd love to do it again next time we get around to it.
Right, so next time...
Well, we should just recap the winners. So it's going to be Raging Bull and Winter Light are moving on.
That's right. And I don't think we did this for the last episode, but it doesn't matter because the past doesn't. The next episode that we are going to be doing will be Like Stars on Earth, which is another from 3 Idiots? Amir Khan.
Amir Khan, yeah.
So this is one that he stars in and directed, I believe, which is going up against Tokyo Story and Whiplash versus Prisoners. What a weird matchup.
Well, that one's great because it's two incredibly overrated films going up against each other.
See, one I like and one I have not seen. I'll let you decide which one is which.
Well, I already know, so I'm not going to say anything. But
oh God, I feel, this has been a roller coaster episode, Michelle.
It has. We went all the highs and lows of humanity were graced in this moment.
So where does the Steven Spielberg fanfiction fall on that scale?
I think the highs of sexual ecstasy of that. Oof. So next episode, we already talked about that. Where can people find you on the internet, Derek?
Well,
if they want to tell you that Howl's Moving Castle is better than Raging Bull.
Well, they could send me an @ reply, as the kids call them, on Twitter. My handle is @Derek_G.
Oh, I'm supposed to say mine. Mine is @SpaceJamFan.
Yeah, and
if you want to send me more fan fiction, I'll take it, and I'll read it to Derek all the chances I get.
I mean, I don't know if this should become a bit, Michelle.
No, I won't. We'll do other bits. The fan fiction might reoccur, but don't worry. I have plenty of other bits in the back pocket to pull out. And
you've got bits in the back pocket?
Now that I know I can just slide them in there and Derek can't stop me.
It's not so much sliding them in as it is just kind of like putting them in there by force.
Yeah.
But so tell us what you think about potential bits on the show by using our show's Twitter account handle thing, which is @middlebrowpod. And if Twitter's not your deal, if Twitter's not your bag, you can always send us an email at middlebrowpodcast@gmail.com.
Correct.
Man, I mean, I don't even know what to think anymore.
Let's just say you're welcome to everybody for our best episode yet.
Yes. If you've made it this far, you are a true fan.
And until next time, I've been Michelle Arf.
And I've been Derek Gatto. Have movies, be jolly.
Have movies, be jolly. Good night, everybody.
Good night.